let's talk about the Hulk, but not the
Hulk! Smash!
Although, admittedly, smashing things does look oddly therapeutic until you remember that drywall is expensive. Today, I want to talk about Bruce Banner, a man who has spent nearly every waking moment trying not to be himself, which is honestly kind of exhausting. Bruce doesn't fear the monster because it's evil. He fears it because it's part of him. And let's be truthful to ourselves, most of us have a Hulk. It's not a giant green rage monster, although that would make traffic considerably more entertaining. But we have parts of ourselves that we don't like. The angry part, the jealous part, the grieving part, the scared part, the version of us where we learned somewhere along the way, if people see this, they'll leave. So we hide it. We smile. We say we're fine. We become incredibly good at pretending. Until one day, pretending becomes impossible. Because here's the thing about emotions, they don't disappear because you ignore them. If anything, they just get louder. So today, we are talking about anger, but we're also talking about shame, trauma, self acceptance, and why the strongest version of ourself might not be the one with the best self control, but the one who's finally willing to stop running. So, for the last time this season, fellow mages, let's get into it. Welcome back, fellow mages, to the Grounded Mage, where we explore how myth and magic exist in everyday life. Bruce's entire life can be summed up in one sentence. Whatever you do, don't lose control. And we see an example of this about halfway through the first Avengers movie when Bruce tells the rest of the team,
The cell was just
In case you needed to kill me, but you can't. I know, I tried. I got low. I didn't see an end, so I put a bullet in my mouth, and the other guy spit it out.
It's a dark moment in the MCU because not only is a beloved comic book character talking about unaliving themselves, but it tells us something else that's terrifying. Bruce doesn't just fear becoming the Hulk. He has spent years believing there is no escape from him. Imagine carrying around something you believe has ruined every chance at a normal life and realizing you can't outrun it even by ending your own story. That's not just fear, that's hopelessness wrapped in shame. Every heartbeat matters. Every stressful conversation matters. Every insult, every frustration, every bad day. Can you imagine living like that? Someone cuts you off in traffic. Better keep my heart rate down. Someone eats your leftovers from the office fridge. Interesting. I'd like to scream, but civilization probably prefers otherwise. Someone says, we need to talk. Bruce is already halfway to another continent. His entire identity becomes organized around suppression. Not healing, not understanding, suppressing, avoiding, containing. Which brings us to one of psychology's most famous findings. Psychologist Daniel Wegner became famous for what's often called the white bear experiment. For this, participants were told one simple thing: don't think about the white bear. And guess what happened? They thought about white bears constantly because our brains don't eliminate unwanted thoughts very well. In fact, they monitor for them, which ironically keeps bringing them back. And this became known as the ironic process theory. The harder we try not to think, not to feel, not to remember, the more those experiences demand our attention. We can see this with Bruce all through the Avengers. He has become a wandering scientist, moving from country to country, meditating, practicing breathing exercises, avoiding conflict, always trying to stay one step ahead of himself. His whole life becomes organized around one goal: don't become the Hulk. But here's the irony. The more his life revolves around avoiding the Hulk, the more the Hulk becomes the center of his identity. He's desperately trying not to become the Hulk, which means he's thinking about the Hulk every second of every day. And a lot of us do this emotionally. But how? Well, we have thoughts like, I shouldn't be angry. I shouldn't still miss them. I shouldn't feel hurt. I shouldn't cry. But our brains hear one thing. Definitely keep checking to see if you still feel this way. Congratulations! Now, this emotion has become your full-time roommate. So let me ask you something. What emotion have you been spending all your energy trying not to feel? And has suppressing it actually made it smaller or just louder? Here's the biggest misconception about anger. We think that anger is the problem, but usually anger is just the bodyguard. Underneath anger is often fear, shame, loss, humiliation, rejection, pain. Think about Bruce. He's not simply angry. He's terrified. He's ashamed. He's traumatized. He's lonely. The Hulk isn't born because Bruce enjoys rage. He's born because Bruce has nowhere else to put overwhelming emotions. Psychologist Paul Ekman described anger as one of our basic emotions, but modern trauma research reminds us that anger often protects more vulnerable feelings underneath it. It's armor. Sometimes it's necessary, sometimes it's life-saving, but armor isn't meant to become your skin. Think about Avengers Age of Ultron. Wanda Maximoff doesn't just magically create anger inside of Bruce. She reaches into his mind and stirs up fear and trauma. The Hulk doesn't emerge because Bruce suddenly decides to lose his temper. He emerges because his nervous system has been overwhelmed. That's an important distinction. Most explosive anger doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from somewhere we've been trying not to look. When was the last time you asked yourself, what am I protecting with this anger? Not why am I angry, but what hurts underneath it? One thing I love about Bruce's story is the villain isn't really the Hulk. The villain is Bruce's war with himself. For years, he believes there are only two choices: control or destruction. But life is almost never that simple. Psychologist Carl Jung introduced the idea of the shadow. Now, the shadow isn't evil. It's the collection of traits, emotions, instincts, and experiences we've rejected because we believe that they make us unacceptable. One of my favorite little moments comes in the Avengers when Captain America finally tells Bruce, now might be a really good time to get angry. And Bruce smiles and says,
That's my secret, Cap. I'm always angry.
everyone cheered because it was an incredible superhero moment, but psychologically, it was also fascinating. Bruce isn't saying he's mastered anger. He's admitting it never actually left. It's always been there. The difference is he's finally stopped pretending it isn't. The more we reject our shadow parts, the stronger they become outside of our awareness. Sound familiar? Bruce literally has a shadow. It has muscles, very little patience, and an unfortunate tendency to throw tanks. But metaphorically, don't we all? Maybe your shadow isn't angry. Maybe it's confidence, ambition, sadness, vulnerability. Maybe it's saying no. The parts we exile don't disappear. They simply wait. One of my favorite arcs in the MCU isn't when Bruce learns to beat the Hulk. It's when he stops trying to. By the time we reach Professor Hulk, something fascinating has happened. He hasn't killed the Hulk, he hasn't imprisoned him, he hasn't won. He's integrated. By the time we meet him in Endgame, this is what he has to say.
For years, I've been treating the Hulk like he's some kind of disease, something to get rid of. But then I start looking at him as the cure. 18 months in the gamma lab. I put the brains and the brawn together. And now look at me. Best of both worlds.
Marvel skips over most of the process, but psychologically, it's one of the healthiest transformations in the entire franchise. Bruce finally stops asking, how do I get rid of the Hulk? And starts asking, how do we work together? That's a completely different question. And it's also a huge psychological difference because acceptance isn't surrender. Acceptance means I can acknowledge this part of myself without letting it run my life. That's remarkably similar to acceptance and commitment therapy. ACT teaches us that psychological flexibility doesn't come from eliminating uncomfortable emotions. It comes from making room for them while choosing actions that align with your values. Notice the difference? Instead of saying, I must never feel angry, we learn, I can feel anger and still choose kindness. I can feel fear and move forward. I can feel grief and still love again. That's integration, not suppression. What part of yourself have you spent years trying to eliminate when maybe your real task is learning how to understand it? I said I would talk about trauma, so here it is. Trauma has an interesting habit. It refuses to stay in the basement. Psychiatrist Bessel Kolk, author of The Body Keeps the Score, explains that traumatic experiences don't simply disappear because we decide that we're finished with them. The body remembers. Our nervous system remembers. Sometimes our reactions make absolutely no sense until we realize that they're answering questions from years ago. Bruce's transformations often happen when he feels unsafe. That's trauma. His body doesn't ask, is this situation dangerous? It asks, does this remind me of danger? Those are not the same thing. We even see this in Thor Ragnarok. Bruce has been gone for 2 years while the Hulk has been in control. When Bruce finally comes back, he's terrified. He doesn't know if transforming again means he'll disappear forever. And that is such a human fear. Healing often asks us to face the very thing we've spent years avoiding. And that can feel like losing ourselves before we discover who we really are. Maybe you've noticed something similar in yourself. A small criticism feels enormous. Someone raises their voice and you panic. Someone leaves you on red for 6 hours, and now you've accidentally planned an entire future where everyone hates you. Our present reactions are often conversations with our past. So, where in your life are you responding to today's situation with yesterday's wounds? There's a beautiful irony in Bruce's story. The thing he spends years trying to destroy ends up saving countless lives because strength itself was never the problem. Unprocessed pain was. One of the things I love the most is despite everything, the Hulk repeatedly chooses to protect people. He saves civilians in Harlem, he fights the Chitauri invasion, he stands up against Ultron, he risks himself against Thanos. The strength was never evil. It simply needed a direction. Isn't that true of so many emotions, though? Anger can become cruelty or it can become courage. Fear can become avoidance or it can become wisdom. Passion can become obsession or it can be your purpose. The Hulk becomes dangerous when Bruce refuses to know him. But once Bruce understands him, that same strength becomes protection. How many qualities about yourself have you mislabeled? Maybe your sensitivity isn't weakness. Maybe it's empathy. Maybe your caution isn't fear. Maybe it's wisdom. Maybe your anger isn't evidence that you're broken. Maybe it's evidence that something important matters deeply to you. The goal isn't becoming emotionless. The goal is becoming emotionally honest. Looking back over this season, it's almost funny how every hero thought their biggest battle was somewhere out there. Spider-Man thought it was responsibility, Hercules thought it was achievement, Elsa thought it was fear, T'Challa thought it was legacy, Aeneas thought it was the past, Geralt thought it was loneliness, and Bruce Banner thought it was the Hulk. But every one of them eventually discovered the same truth. The hardest battle wasn't against any villain. It was learning to make peace with themselves. So here's this season's final reflection. If every emotion inside you had a voice, which one has been waiting the longest to be heard? Not obeyed, not unleashed, just heard. Because healing doesn't begin when we become perfect. It begins when we stop treating parts of ourselves like unwanted guests. Maybe your Hulk isn't asking permission to smash the world. Maybe The strongest people aren't those who never lose control. Maybe they're the ones brave enough to stop fighting themselves. Mages, what an incredible season this has been. Thank you for laughing with me, reflecting with me, and walking this hero's journey together. Whether you've been here since season 1, episode 1, or joined somewhere along the way, I'm so grateful that you've chosen to spend this time with me every week. And if you enjoy the reflection questions I ask during these episodes, don't forget to grab your copy of the Hero's Journey Journal. It's designed to help you take these conversations beyond the podcast and into your own story, one page at a time. There is a link for a freebie preview in the description down below, and if you like that, there's also links to purchase this item in the description down below. Now, season 3 starts this fall, and we are going back to our roots. We are going to be exploring the big ideas that shape our lives: identity, courage, purpose, resilience, relationships, meaning, with plenty of deep character dives sprinkled in along the way. I already have some incredible adventures planned, and I genuinely cannot wait to share them with you. In the meantime, take care of yourselves, be curious about your own story, and remember, every great hero has a shadow. And every shadow becomes a little less frightening when we decide to turn around and face it. I will see you back here in the fall. Until then, fellow mages, make it make magic.